While the shonen genre is much older than Bleach, it's undeniable that this series by mangaka Tite Kubo is arguably one of the definitive works in this genre. It sits right alongside the juggernauts like Naruto, Dragon Ball, and One Piece. What makes an excellent shonen manga, you might ask, and what does it take to be considered one of the greatest anime/mangas of all time? Outside of luck, if one were to look at the more tangible factors that distinguish a good series from a great series, and a great series from a legendary one, you'd notice some recurring themes. There has to be a compelling protagonist who continues to grow in power level throughout the series as he faces increasingly difficult foes. This increase in power levels has to be shown in a manner that's appealing to the audience. The overarching storyline has to make sense to the audience as to why the hero of the story sets out on his journey. There needs to be cool abilities and powers that instantly capture an audience's attention as well. Finally, we also believe that the villains that the protagonist goes up against have to be of an extremely high quality. In many cases, some of these villains are shown to be more popular than many of the good guys in the series. We feel that Bleach fulfills all of these criteria and then some to an extremely high level. Now, combine this with Tite Kubo's amazing art style and story, and you have a winning formula. Elite groups of villains in shonen manga isn't a revolutionary idea by any means. We have the likes of the Juppon Katana from the Rurouni Kenshin world, or the Akatsuki from Naruto, just to name a couple that captivated audiences long before the Espada were an afterthought in Kubo's mind. However, the Espada are more than deserving of their place as one of the most iconic villain groups all of anime and manga. Ever since its debut in 2001, Bleach has had a number of story arcs that contain a wide variety of villains whom Ichigo and his group have had to go up against. Even the current Thousand-Year Blood War arc has a group of elite villains called the Stern Ritters. Well, the Stern Ritters are arguably as powerful, if not more so than the Espada. They're not as popular with the fans. Even now, the Espada are constantly talked about and discussed in fan forums, which goes to show how beloved some of these characters truly are. In today's Marvelous Anime video, we're going to be doing a deep dive into this iconic group and exploring all there is to know about them. Their origins, their powers, and even some lesser known facts about them. We'll be discussing everything so that when you finish this video, you'll be much more informed about the world of Bleach in general. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the world of Hueco Mundo as we wander under its eternal night sky to learn more about its denizens, the 10 swords of Aizen the Espada. Origins. To understand the origins of the Espada, one must first understand the evolutionary process of hollows. A hollow is a spirit whose heart has withered away due to despair or regret, usually after lingering in the world of the living for too long. Any spirit that doesn't pass on into soul society and remains tethered to the human world has a chance of becoming a hollow. They turn into malevolent spirits who devour living creatures and their souls. However, at a certain point, after reaching a degree of corruption, these hollows are no longer satisfied by devouring human souls and begin feeding on each other. As they do so, the strongest amongst them begin to rise, fueled by the souls of their kind. These hollows are called Menos Grande. The weakest of these Menos are called the Gillian, who are an amalgamation of hollows with no personality of their own, fueled by a single desire to feed. However, every once in a while, amongst these lower tier Menos, there appears one who has been taken over by a singular hollow soul within them. These Gillians are the ones with the potential to evolve further. These chosen Gillians continue feeding on other hollows and eventually attain sentience and a unique form. In this state, they are known as Adhujas, and unless they continue feeding and gaining more power, they'll slowly regress back to their Gillian state. Despite relentless feeding, it seems that it's not guaranteed for an Adhujas to transform into a Vasto Lorde, which is the next stage in a hollow evolution. Once a hollow reaches this stage, it's at the peak of its powers, and there's no natural progression for it beyond this point. According to Hitsugaya, if Aizen were to have even 10 or so of these Vasto Lordes, the Soul Society's ruin was all but guaranteed. Now, you must be thinking, if Vasto Lordes are the pinnacle of a hollow's evolution, what are the Espada? The keyword in our earlier sentence was natural. This is one more level above the Vasto Lorde, however, it can only be achieved by a forced evolution through the power of Aizen's Hogyokyu. Those chosen by him have their hollow masks removed and their true power sealed within a Zanpakuto, which they can release just like a Shinigami. The removal of the mask, along with them gaining a Zanpakuto, is to signify that they have transcended the status of a regular Menos. These hollows are called the Arankars, and the strongest of these are the 10 Espada. Aizen's personal guard. They were originally believed to be ranked from 1 to 10, but we later found out that the actual ranking of the Espada was from 0 to 9. It's widely agreed upon that most of these Arancars, especially the Espada, were Vasto Lordes who were modified by Aizen. There are rumors of there being naturally created Arancars, but nothing regarding this has been explored further by Kubo. What we do know is that these early Arancars were much weaker than the ones that came later. The ranks of the Espada have therefore continuously changed over the course of the group's existence. To find out about their fate, keep watching this video to the end. However, this is what we know regarding the origins of the Espada. Powers and abilities. The Espada have all the powers and abilities that a Hollow has and then some. These abilities are so powerful that Aizen forbids some of them being used within his fortress, Las Noches in Hueco Mundo. In this section, we're going to be laying out all of their abilities, including the ones accessible only to them. Sonido! This is a movement ability equivalent to a Shinigami Shunpo or a Quincy's Hirenkyaku, although this ability can only be used by an Arankar. Although it performs the same functions as the previously mentioned techniques, Sonido is fundamentally different in all aspects, including execution and technique. According to Kubo himself, while Shunpo is learned through intense physical training, and to use Hirenkyaku, one must master the ability to manipulate Reishi, Sonido is actually quite instinctual in nature and is used by converting the individual's internal Reishi into something that's not quite Reiatsu. He unfortunately didn't elaborate on what this something that's not quite Reiatsu is, but we get the point that it's fundamentally different from the other movement techniques. According to the author of the light novel Ryogo Narita in Bleach Can't Fear Your Own World, when using Sonido, a Hollow expels no Reiatsu, making it virtually undetectable to people relying on tracking Reiatsu to keep up with its speed. This makes it ideal for hit-and-run strategies, but it doesn't seem to be applied in this manner by any of the Arancars due to their vast powers, which makes them prefer a much more direct style of fighting. Amongst the Espada, the likes of Coyote Stark, Grimjaw, Ukora, Herbel, Zomari Ruro, and Nalile are considered to be masters of this technique. Their mastery of the Sonido is such that they can cover great distances in the blink of an eye, which makes their movement look like teleportation. They're also fast enough to create after images of themselves and are seen keeping up with the Shunpo of some of the fastest Shinigami around. However, not all Espadas seem to be concerned about mastering this technique, and an individual's proficiency in Sonido is different from person to person. According to Zomari, the 7th Espada, he had the fastest Sonido amongst all the Arancars and Espada. However, this is not a verified fact. The sounds that Sonido makes are also quite unique. It sounds like a low boom that's characterized in the manga as bun. Out of all the movement techniques in the series, I think most Bleach fans will agree that the sound of Sonido is just so satisfying to listen to. Kaja Negion. The Kaja Negion is not really a natural ability, but more of an item that is given solely to the Espada by Aizen. This item has the ability to create a field that somewhat mimics the Negion ability of lower-class Menos, although for a vastly different reason. While Negion is used by the Menos to save others of their kind from harm, Kaja Negion is used by an Espada only to punish their fraction if they feel that it's necessary. The Kaja Negation is a small cube-shaped device that can be activated by placing it within a Hollow's hole. This results in the device getting activated, and the targeted Hollow becomes trapped within an alternate pocket dimension indefinitely. It is forbidden to use this ability on other Espada. However, even if they did do so, like in the case of Grimjaw when he used it on Ukora, an Espada is too powerful to be trapped within it for long. Grimjaw speculated that an Arankar as powerful as Ukora would break free from the Kaja Negation's imprisonment within 2 to 3 hours. However, it's a testament to this device and its ability that it can trap an Espada even for a few hours, considering these beings' power levels. Enhanced Hero. This is the most powerful defensive technique in possession of an Arankar and the Espada. Unlike other techniques that need to be activated by the Espada, this Hero is an ability that is constantly active. An Arankar and Espada naturally condense their spiritual energy to form a hardened skin capable of blocking even a Zanpakuto. Some Arankars are so proficient in this technique that they're capable of fighting barehanded with their enemies. The word Hero translates to iron, and it does make an Espada as tough as the element it's named after. The strength of one's Hero, like any other ability, depends on the individual's spiritual energy. Noitra Joruga, the Quinto or number 5 Espada, claimed that he had the strongest Hero amongst all the Espada. However, if one were to take into account that Hero's strength depends on the Arankar's Reiryoku, there are 4 other Espada that are stronger than him by a significant degree, meaning their Hero should be stronger than his. Regardless, the hero doesn't make an Espada invincible, and they can still be cut through it, as seen when Kenpachi cuts through Nitra after finally deciding to take the fight seriously. This is nonetheless a formidable defensive ability, as it takes next to no extra Reiatsu to upkeep and provides an additional layer of defense to an Espada with next to no drawbacks. Different types of Seros. As the Espada are on the very top of the Hollow's pecking order, it only makes sense that they have the ability to use different types of Seros. Some of these are available to all Menos, while there are others that can only be used by the Espada, and some unique ones that are limited to the individuals who created them. We're going to fill you in on all these different types of Seros so you can see exactly how strong the Espada truly are, even compared to their own kind. Firstly, a Sero is an energy attack created by externally amassing a high volume and concentration of Reiatsu and firing it at a target. This attack is usually red in color and can be used by most Menos regardless of their class. The destructive force behind this attack can vary depending on the individual firing it, meaning an Espada's Sero will always be stronger than a Gilead's, if the former purposely doesn't limit their power. There is, however, a variation of the Sero which can only be used by the Espadas, known as the Gran Rey Sero. This Sero is so powerful that it is one of those abilities that Aizen banned from being used within Los Noches, as it contains the power to destroy the fortress. Unlike a normal Sero, this Sero is fired by an Espada after mixing their blood with a regular Sero, greatly enhancing its power and speed. The Gran Rey Sero is so powerful that it's able to bend the very fabric of space as it travels towards its target. Visually, this Sero takes on the color of the individual firing it and appears highly volatile while it's being charged by the user. The only known person besides an Espada who has used a Gran Rey Sero is Ichigo. Aside from the Gran Rey Sero, the other Sero type that is common for most Espada to use is Sero Oscuras. We have only ever seen this Sero being used by an Espada after they enter their resurrection form. It's compared by Ukora to a black Getsuga Tensho, perhaps hinting that this is a Sero that can only be used by an Espada after they have released their sword seal. While the power of the Gran Rey Sero is debated against that of the Sero Oscuras, what we can say is that Oscuras can be fired consecutively by an Espada, unlike the Gran Rey. It also universally looks pitch black, as if trying to signify the darkness that has been finally unleashed by one that has undergone resurrection. While casting a Sero, an Espada has to take on a certain pose or make a certain set of motions that are unique to the individual. This, however, doesn't apply to the Primera Espada, Coyote Stark. Besides these common Seros, there are other types of these attacks that can only be used by the Espada that created them. For instance, Neliel's Sero Double is an attack where she can swallow a Sero fired against her and then unleash it back at her attacker, augmenting it with a Sero of her own and greatly increasing its damage. Another example of this is Stark's signature, Sero Metraleta, which allows him to fire a continuous barrage of Seros from points around the barrel of his right gun in his resurrection Los Lobos. These unique Seros aren't just limited to the Espada, and some fraction have also been seen using their own Seros. Discorder. This is an ability used by the Hollows, especially the Arancars and Espada, to travel between the three realms. They do so by opening a portal into the Garganta, which is a void filled with turbulent and wild reishi, which means that someone with no training in reishi manipulation can easily be swept away by it and lost forever. To traverse through these tunnels, one must create footholds using their reishi. An Espada level Hollow is capable of quite easily opening up a passage into the Garganta, and unlike those opened by lesser Hollows, thanks to their usage of Discorer, the portals are far more stable. It seems the Espadas can also open various Garganta portals to be used for surveillance. The Espada do not require any special techniques or Reiatsu to open or use Discorer, and they are seen opening these portals with a mere gesture of their hands. Resurrection. Out of all the abilities that an Espada possesses, this is by far the most iconic and epic. When a Hollow is transformed into an Arancar, the majority of its form and power are sealed within its sword, which is also known as a Zanpakuto. Keisuke Uehara has likened Resurrection to a Shinigami's Bankai, as both abilities grant a major power boost along with releasing their ultimate potential. While not all Bankais result in a physical transformation of their wielder, a Resurrection guarantees that there will be a significant alteration to an Espada's appearance when activated. It's assumed that the form that the Espada takes in their Resurrection is actually their true Hollow form, which is plausible as the sword does seal their true power. Normally, when an Espada goes into their Resurrection, their forms resemble that of animals and insects. However, this isn't always the case, and there doesn't seem to be any rule regarding this. For an Espada to activate their Resurrection, they do not need to unsheath their blade like a Shinigami, and they only need to utter their weapon's release command. In their true form, their speed, agility, strength, and power are all greatly enhanced. They also gain a number of new abilities that are unique from Espada to Espada. If an Espada discards a part of their body that constitutes their resurrection before resealing their sword, they lose that part permanently. For an Espada to return to humanoid form, they have to be drained of their Ryotsu, knocked out, or they have to reseal it themselves. If, for whatever reason, an Espada's blade is broken, they lose access to their resurrection. When an Espada activates their resurrection, all of their wounds, no matter how grievous, are instantly healed as they enter their new form. This is despite 90% of the Arrancar having given up their high-speed regeneration in exchange for a massive boost to offensive power. Whatever damage they've taken prior to entering resurrection is completely healed, even if they were to come out of the resurrection taking heavy damage. The only known Espada to have had a secondary resurrection was Ukora Cypher, the Quattro Espada. According to him, not even Aizen knew about this transformation of his. Ishida Uryu describes this sensation of his aura outside of its tremendous size and power as being something that he had never felt before. It's to be noted that Espadas from rank 4 and upwards are forbidden from using their resurrection within the fortress of Las Noches, making it the second forbidden technique within their headquarters. Where do the Espadas live? The Espada dwell, like most hollows, within the realm of Hueco Mundo, which is one of the 3 realms formed alongside Soul Society and the world of the living from the sundering of the primordial world. The world of Hueco Mundo is one of eternal night and endless deserts. The moon phase is directly opposite to its phase in the human world. The landscape is littered with tall spires, which at first glance from afar may be mistaken for trees, but are towers composed of minerals. There is no respite in this land as it's harsh, if not harsher, than any desert in the land of the living. This realm is brimming with reishi, making it ideal for the sustenance of hollows, even without feeding on human souls. It also makes it an ideal place for that Hujas to try to evolve into Vasto Lordes and thrive, as there are plenty of hollows and menos for them to feed upon. All of the current Espada prior to being discovered by Aizen dwelt within this realm. Aizen's great palace, Las Noches, which formerly belonged to Secunda Espada Baragon Luisenbern, also lies in Hueco Mundo. It's also where the Espada currently dwell. Espadas and the aspects of death. Kubo has put a lot of thought into the characters of the Espada, from their design to their personality. However, this decision to design their characters both artistically and through writing has a much deeper meaning behind. Each of the Espada represent a cause of human death, and it's reflected not just in their design, but also in their personality and goals. So, while we're discussing what aspect of death and human vice they represent, let us introduce you briefly to all of them as well. Primera Espada, Coyote Stark, Solitude. It's easy to get fooled by Stark's laid-back and easygoing nature without realizing he's the #1 ranked Espada. Long ago, before becoming an Arrancar, there was a Vasto Lorde so powerful that merely being in its presence killed hollows and humans alike. It cursed its strength, and the resulting lonely fate it seemed destined to suffer for all eternity. It envied the weak, for it felt that they were at least not lonely and could form bonds. It longed to become weak so that it too could escape its loneliness. To this end, it divided itself into 2 beings, Stark and Lilynette Gingerbuck. Neither of them remembers whom the other was divided from, but they remember being overjoyed at having escaped their loneliness. Aizen first encountered them sitting near a pile of hollow corpses, and upon inquiring whether the duo had killed them, found out that they had just died by being close to Stark and Lilynette. He invited them to join his comrades, which the duo gladly accepted, finally having found somebody who could stay with them without dying and actually wanted their company. The Secunda Espada, Baragon Luisenbern, Old Age. Nobody knows how ancient Baragon Luisenbern is, but as far as anyone could remember, he's lorded over all of Hueco Mundo from his former palace, Las Noches. All we know is this former emperor of Hueco Mundo was powerful enough to rule his realm with impunity for an unknown number of years. Baragon was powerful enough for Aizen to subjugate him using his Shikai Kyoka Suigetsu. Despite joining Aizen's Espada, Baragon vowed to take revenge on it. Just like Stark, anyone who wandered within a certain radius of Baragon would simply perish. This was because when he's in his resurrection, all things within a certain distance of him age rapidly and die of decay. He's also capable of releasing a purple miasma that has the same effect on anything it touches, organic, inorganic, and even keto. In fact, release command for his Zanpakuto Arrogante is Rot. In his resurrection form, his appearance is akin to an elder lich, possibly signifying his old age, power of decay through time. The Tres Espada Tir Herbel, Sacrifice. Despite her ruthless and even condescending nature against her opponents in combat, Herbel displays a softer side towards her Fraction, which is perhaps the reason she embodies sacrifice. Although Fracción are the direct subordinates of Espada, there is no emotional connection between the two parties. She's willing to go so far as attacking Captain Commander Yamamoto despite the gulf in their powers in order to avenge them. Herbel believes that there is no world without sacrifice, and she's willing to bear her own when it's time for her to do so. She seems to have been ruling Hueco Mundo after Aizen's defeat with a firm hand, but seems to have retained her personality of putting her subordinates before herself. When confronted by Yuhavok and defeated, she urges them to flee, trying to buy time for them by sacrificing herself. In fact, all those years ago, when Aizen first recruited her, she would sacrifice herself once more to buy time for her subordinates to escape. However, they were moved by her sense of sacrifice and returned to help her before she was eventually rescued by Aizen and joined the Espada. The Quattro Espada? Ukora Cipher. Nothings. Ukora Cipher is perhaps the embodiment of nihilism, as he has nothing that he deeply cares for, nor does he understand others' need for doing so. He seeks to sow despair in the hearts of all those he comes across, whether they be allies or enemies. Ukora claims to not understand the meaning of having a heart, and therefore doesn't comprehend human emotions. When Ichigo continues to try hard against him despite being completely overwhelmed, it stirs something within Ukora that he himself cannot understand. Due to this, he goes all out to stamp out Ichigo's will by releasing his Segunda Etapa, despite not really needing to. In the end, as he dies, he gains what he never had, which is a heart, as the void within him is finally filled. The Quinto Espada, Nitra Juruga. Despair. The Nitra was the former 8th numbered Espada who rose to his current station after betraying Nalail, the former Tres Espada. He is a ruthless being who solely lives to fulfill his bloodlust and battle frenzy. The Nitra has been known to wipe out entire colonies of Hollows and even kill Ariniro. He disguised Aizen's orders to find a Vasto Lorde to indiscriminately kill using the excuse that they weren't worthy. However, we feel that the reason he is said to be the embodiment of despair instead of Ukora, who is a more direct candidate for this title, is because firstly, Ukora already embodies nothingness, and secondly, Nitra is the representation of a different kind of despair. There's no doubt that he spreads agony wherever he travels, killing indiscriminately in search of a good fight. However, as seen during his battle against Nell when she doesn't finish him off, Kenpachi, who refuses to do the same initially as well, the despair he embodies is the one he feels in his own heart. Nitra has a massive inferiority complex, which fills his heart with dread and knowing that he had been spared due to him being weaker than his quarry. His pride is unable to take this, which is the reason he lashes out and isn't averse to using underhanded tactics. The despair he sows through his killings is a twisted way of him trying to cover up the despair he feels within, knowing that no matter what he does, there's always someone who's going to be stronger than him. He betrays Nalail, hoping to become the Tres Espada, but is only promoted to Quinto as Herbel proves to be too strong for him. In our opinion, this internal conflict is the despair that Nitra embodies. The Sexta Espada, Grimmjow Jägerjackes. Destruction. A fan favorite Espada, Grimmjow continues to make his presence felt even during the 1,000-year Blood War arc where he makes an appearance. Currently embodying the anti-hero archetype, Grimmjow was a fully fledged antagonist when he was first introduced to us as the Sexta Espada. He has a feral cunning about him which is tempered by a strong sense of honor. However, despite his laid-back nature on the surface, he's extremely hot-headed and will destroy anything that comes in between him and his opponents, even if it's his own allies or someone stronger than him. Grimmjow is known for relentlessly pursuing his targets until he destroys them. The pure battle frenzy and destruction he wreaks upon the environment and opponents is perhaps the reason he's considered to be the aspect of death through destruction. The Septima Espada, Zomati Ruro, Ecstasy. The state of ecstasy and frenzy have a very thin line dividing them. In either state, an individual experiences a sort of high, where momentarily they're driven to do things outside of their rationality. Zomati's Resurrection ability takes on this as he can cast his love or amor to any target that his eyes can see. For instance, if his eyes are locked on an individual's, then that person loses control and Zomati gains it. Considering that he has 58 eyes in his Resurrection, he can cast this ability on virtually anything on the battlefield as long as it's organic. He embodies ecstasy, which is felt through amor, or love, as it's translated in English. He's not shy about giving his love to anyone, as his 58 eyes are sufficient to cover almost everyone on a battlefield. By casting amor on the head of a person, he can control their brain just like how an intoxicant can influence a person's actions, and this is how he embodies the aspect of ecstasy. The Octava Espada, Zea Laporto Grans. Madness. The reason that Zea Laporto embodies madness is fairly straightforward. He is a mad scientist who experiments on both himself and his victims without any ethics. Not that we would expect an Espada to adhere to human morality, but Zaporto is especially brutal regarding his experiments. He views others as nothing more than lab rats and has no empathy or sympathy towards them. Unlike the other Espada, every move that he makes is to add to his so-called perfection. Despite his lower rank, Zaporto is perhaps the most evil of all the Espada because while the rest operate on their instincts, Zaporto's actions are deliberate and well thought out. He perfectly embodies the evil mad scientist archetype, making him a natural choice as Mayuri Kurotsuchi's opponent. The Noveno Espada, Ariniro Arururi Gri. Ariniro has the unique ability to absorb, devour a hollow, and receive all of its powers and Reiatsu. While all Menos cannibalize each other to gain more power, the way in which Ariniro does it is extremely unique. By consuming a hollow, Ariniro gains all the powers, abilities, memories, and even muscle memories of that individual. By consuming Metastasia, who had devoured Kaien Shiba previously, he gained the powers of this lieutenant-class Shinigami as well. He could use every ability that Kaien had in his life. Just like Metastasia, he's able to merge his spirit with other creatures and take them over, making their abilities and form his own. Over the course of his life, he is claimed to have devoured over 30,000 hollows. The theme of consumption is pretty prevalent when it comes to its powers and personality, which correlates to it embodying greed or gluttony as it greedily devours all that it comes across. Even its Zanpakuto is aptly named Gluttonaria and is activated by the word devour. Having no real structured form in his resurrection, one can say that Ariniro tries to compensate for this by stealing the form and abilities of others as it greedily seeks to fill the void within. The Diaz/Cero Espada Yami Largo Rage. The reason why Yami embodies the aspect of rage is pretty straightforward, as you'll find out. Initially, Yami is ranked as the weakest member of the Espada as its 10th member. This, however, swiftly changes when he unleashes his Resurrection, aptly named Enrage. The number 10 tattooed on his body changes to 0, displaying his true power as a being even above the Primera Espada. Yami is essentially the Incredible Hulk of Bleach, as his form and power continuously increase and evolve the angrier he gets. With the simplest flick of his limbs, he can destroy the walls of Hueco Mundo. He can also swat away enemies with minimal effort. His power levels are so high that Kubo kills him off-screen, and all we know is that it took the combined might of 2 of the strongest Gotei 13 captains to take him down. It's a shame we didn't get to see to what extent Yami's rage empowers him, but for someone to go from the weakest Espada to the strongest just shows what an overwhelming power boost this rage-filled monster gains. Priveron Espada, the Discarded Ones. Over the course of his time in Hueco Mundo, and even prior to that, Aizen constantly experimented with hollows. As such, the roster of Espada that we're introduced to is hardly its initial iteration. An Espada can easily lose their rank if someone stronger comes along or they cease to be of any use to Aizen. These former Espadas are known as Priveron Espada and are assigned a 3-digit number. While it's not clear what the Arankar Dordoni meant by this, he refers to the Priveron Espada as the last of the naturally created Arankars before Aizen began creating them to meet his own standards. Apparently, these Espada were rendered obsolete after this, making them lose their rank. The Priveron Espada are still extremely strong because, while they might not hold the rank, they were once strong enough to be categorized as an Espada. It is implied that the 3rd number in their current rank indicates their actual original number. For example, Dordoni is ranked at 103 in Aizen's army, while he was most likely the Tres Espada formerly. Where are the Espada current? Most of the Espada were killed during various battles prior to Aizen's downfall. Those who remained, like Grimmjow, Herbel, and Nell, operate independently and most likely no longer carry the title of Espada with them. After all, the Espada was a title created by Aizen to rank the strongest of his Arankar. With him no longer around, it makes no sense for them to carry on calling themselves that. Grimmjow and Neliel are seen during the Thousand Years Blood War arc, aiding the Shinigami in fighting against the Quincy, as they are their natural enemies as well. Herbel, who had taken up the mantle of the ruler of Hueco Mundo, is captured alongside numerous Arankar and Vasto Lorde and imprisoned within the Silbern. Many of the Arankar were recruited forcibly by the Quincy to fight on their behalf. After Yuhavok's defeat, it's assumed that Herbel resumed her role as the ruler of Hueco Mundo. Marvelous verdict! The Espada are part of an era of Bleach that really catapulted the franchise into the stratosphere. Whenever one talks about the series, the Espada are always a topic of conversation, even though since then, we have seen antagonists like Fullbringers or even the Quincy Sternritters. This original group of villains remains dear to fans of the series. These characters are so cool and badass that even now they make the top 10 favorite character lists of a lot of Bleach fans. Kubo really showed the rest of the manga/anime world how to create compelling side characters and villains with how he rendered the Espada. Every great shonen manga needs an elite group of villains to tackle. Outside of Naruto's Akatsuki, the Espada are probably the most well-known villainous group in shonen history. We think Kubo realized just how popular the Espada were, prompting him to include them in the 1000 Years Blood War arc as well. We hope that through this video, we were able to shed some more light on their nature and character. You know how we love Bleach on this channel, and we'd love to keep talking to you about the Espada. However, our time together has come to an end for now. We'll be doing detailed anatomy videos on some of the Espada that we discussed today, so be sure to tell us which are your favorites down below if you'd like us to cover them more in depth in future videos. If this video piqued your interest, we have tons more on our channel where we cover Bleach and probably several of your other favorite animes and mangas. So be sure to check those out after you're done here, and finally, thanks for sticking with us right to the end of this one. Hope to see you soon in the next marvelous video, but until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.